Hello everyone and welcome to The Red Path. My name is Dara and today I'll be walking you through a painting tutorial for World Leader Jakhals, the mortal chaff driven before the enemy to kill, maim and burn. Jakhals are deceptively tricky models to paint, so if you're just getting started and have picked up the combat patrol box, I recommend starting with a berserker, and once you're comfortable with that, move on to these guys. We'll be working on two models today to show off two different recipes for skin tones. If you want more like this, be sure to check out all the links down below and our Discord. Anyway, let's get into the tutorial. We're going to begin with the paler skin tone and open things up with a base coat layer of a mixture of half and half RAKARTH flesh and pink horror. A lot of beginners use Citadel flesh tone paints straight out of the pot, but by mixing with a light pink colour like this, we can achieve a tone which is more natural and gives the illusion of blood flowing under the skin. It's a very simple first step, but as you'll see, it adds a really nice effect as we build up from this foundation. We've also watered down from this base coat layer to thin the paints a little, and you'll notice it looks pretty bad right now. That's totally fine and completely normal. Instead of applying one thick layer of paint, which may obscure some of the nice detail on a miniature, like all that muscle definition, we'll build up several thin layers of paint to ensure we have a strong base coat which hasn't blocked out any cool details. As you can see, the second layer of paint is really bringing out that nice flesh tone, but we're retaining all that muscle definition too. This multiple thin layer technique is a great method to use on any miniature, but it is especially important for smaller miniatures like cultists, jackals and the like, since they tend to have tiny details which can easily be drowned out by too thick paint. Now we're going to apply a thin layer of RAKARTH flesh, selectively, over the torso. The goal here is to pick out the raised areas of the muscle, like this abdomen, and carefully apply the RAKARTH flesh, while leaving some of the initial base coat in the recessed areas. This will allow us to build up tone, and a very subtle but effective shadowing technique. It also makes the skin look more realistic, living, and believable. Patience here is really the key, and use a smaller brush if you're struggling to apply it correctly. Now we're going to apply a wash, which is a very diluted acrylic paint of REIKLAND FLESHSHADE. This will tint and filter the entire torso area, pooling in the recesses of the miniature and adding even more depth, while also tying in our first two layers of paint. It's important here to control where the wash flows, pushing it into the recesses with your paintbrush to avoid the wash drying in flat areas and creating a patina or coffee stain, which is unsightly and ugly. To add just a little bit of spice, we're going to apply a second wash now. This time it's CARROBURG Crimson, and we're going to apply this selectively, picking out only the deepest recessed areas and areas where there are open wounds or scars for its application. This will help pull the eye to these interesting parts of the model and start to tell a bit of a story about who this person is. Okay, let's switch things up and work on a darker skin tone now. It's a great idea to vary up skin tones in your army, since it adds more diversity and visual interest to your units on the table. For a base coat, we're going to start with a mix of Screamer Pink and RHINOX, again doing two thin layers over all the exposed skin on this jackal. Following the same procedure we did for the pale skin, we're going to carefully apply a mix of MOURNFANG brown and RHINOX hide on the raised muscles, leaving our darker base coat in the recesses and shadowy areas. To add more depth, we're going to carefully apply a wash of AGRAX Earthshade now, which will bring a lot more shadows into the miniature and unite our two initial layers of paint. Let's start on some metallic areas now. We're using Gunmetal, a paint from Ammo MIG, as our base coat. But if you want to stick with Citadel, Iron Warriors would work just fine here. We want a dark, dingy iron colour to represent the more worn, battered gear that Jakhals would be using, since they're scavenging what they can for weapons. It's a good idea to keep things like this in mind when you're painting, so you can accurately portray the effect that you're going for, and keep a sense of story with the miniature too. To add some highlights now and accentuate that weathered, worn look, we're going to dry brush on a brighter metallic colour. I'm using steel from Ammo MIG here, but you could use any bright or mid-tone metallics for Citadel, whatever suits yourself. To dry brush, load your brush up with paint and remove most of it on a piece of paper or your palette. Then, using quick sharp motions, swipe your brush across the target area. It will create an interesting scratchy pattern, which is perfect for representing older metal areas. Alright, let's add a spot colour now. Spot colours are used to draw the eye to interesting parts of the model, like what weapons they're carrying, and typically are quite a bright colour. In this case, we've chosen MEPHISTON Red. Not only does this pull the eye to the RHINOX casing, but it tells a story about the miniature. Firstly, the mismatched weapons means they've probably been scavenging and barely surviving, but the red colour also helps unify these mortal followers with the bulky Space Marine berserkers, and on the tabletop it will help to make your army look more cohesive. I'd recommend not overdoing it with spot colours though, they're meant to be used minimally and sparingly, so keep this in mind if you're adding them to your Jakhals. Now we're going to work on some leathers. For this, I've started with a base coat of THONDIA bark. It's a nice dark leathery brown, but it's also slightly brighter than the RHINOX hide, which we've used for the darker skin tone. This helps differentiate different aspects of the miniature. We're going to give this the usual 2 thin layers to ensure a strong base coat. To add some texture and weathering to the leathers, we're going to dry brush on a layer of MOURNFANG brown. Look for folds and wrinkles in the material, and dry brush in a perpendicular motion to these areas. It will help create realistic stress marks and push a convincing type of leather effect. Let's quickly pop in some skulls. I'm base coating these with XV88, a solid sandy colour, which is a reliable base tone for skulls and bones of all varieties. Once that's dry, we'll hit it with 2 successive dry brushes. First, ZANDRI dust will provide a nice mid-tone, and a lighter dry brush of USHABTI bone will be a great highlight to make the skulls pop out from the darker browns of the leather. Don't forget to keep an eye out for any small, extra little bits on the Jakhals, like the fangs on the ends of their weapons. It's easy to miss these bone parts, but if you dot them in, again, it's another nice spot colour. We're getting close to closing this miniature out, so let's add some washes. Firstly, a solid wash of NULN oil over the reds and metal areas will provide some shadows and depth. As always, be careful about controlling the flow, ensuring it's not pooling anywhere you don't want it to be. Once that wash is dry, we'll do a wash of AGRAX Earthshade. This will be applied to the metal areas to make them look aged, but also the leathers and bones to add some shadows and unify those dry brushed layers. close it out, we're going to add every World Eater player's favourite paint, Blood for the Blood God. Use this effect sparingly and apply it with an older, frayed brush in a jagged, slashing motion to create realistic blood streaks on the weapon. Once you get confident with this paint, you'll be able to play around with different types of blood effects, but remember, less is always more with this one. Don't drown the guy in the blood of his enemies. That'll do it for these two. Let's get them into the photo booth and see how they're looking. I hope you folks have enjoyed this quick tutorial and found it useful, especially if you're just starting out with painting. There's plenty more painting videos for beginners and advanced painters here on the Red Path, and we have painting streams twice a week on Twitch, so be sure to check the links down below. If you want to support us and get more personal painting coaching, we have a Patreon that you can join with a host of benefits there too. And if you want to be part of the conversation, hop into our Discord and show your minis off to everyone. Next week, we'll be rounding out our Getting Started series with a certain mounted madman, so be sure to tune in for that. But until then, and until the next one, stay healthy folks, stay safe, and kill, maim, burn.